Hey everyone, welcome to Wolfpain's Gaming Den. Today we'll be doing a full tutorial for the game PI, designed by Martin Wallace and published by Tree Frog Games. It's a game that plays, I believe, 2 to 5 players in roughly a little less than an hour. It's a deduction game where essentially you're playing a detective who's looking to solve a crime across a city, and you're trying to figure out who the criminal is, what sort of crime was committed, and where the crime was committed. So let's go to the table. Let's see how the setup works and how the rules work, and we'll come back at the end for some final thoughts. Alright everyone, so welcome to the tutorial for the game PI. Here we have the game set up for 2 players, but for ease of explanation, I'll be using components for 1 player, which will be sort of like controlled by myself. But the game will work pretty much the same way regardless of whether you're playing a 2-player or a 3-player or 4 or 5-player games. So the rules are going to be pretty much identical. At the start of the game, you'll lay out the game board. You will see that the game board itself is broken up into different areas denoted by different locations. There is multiple of them going on. Each one of them will have a location for a suspect, which will be empty. Location itself, so here we have the lakeside location with the lakeside location pre-printed tile over here, and then the third one is going to be for crime, and all of the locations will be set up the same way, where the center location area is pre-populated and then the other 2 are empty. What you will do is you will take these tiles that have suspect and crime written on the back of it, randomly shuffle them out separately, and then lay down the suspect tiles face down on the suspect tile locations, crime on the crime tile locations, and then flip them face up. Some of them will say no suspect or no crime, and that is perfectly fine. You will leave them where it is. Once you've got the game board set up in that way, you will give each of the players their own player pieces, which will basically constitute of these investigator tiles. So each player will get 5 of it in their chosen color. Each player will also get the cubes and discs of the chosen color as well. So here you can see I have the red tokens, so the red wooden cubes as well as the red cylinders right there. Each player will pick up their token for penalty points, and you will put it on 0 right at the bottom there. And then you will pick up your 3 tokens for that will have first case, second case, and third case written on it. You will take them and put them to the side. These will be put on the board once you've completed or solved cases or a particular round ends. And then lastly, 2 more steps left with the cards. There are 2 different kind of cards that come in the game. Ones that have a background with just PI written on it. You will take these, give them a thorough shuffle, and then lay out 9 face up to the side of the board, and then the draw deck to the side. Players will be choosing from this face up row at any given point in time, and then replenishing from the face down deck when and as required. Then you will have 3 other different kind of cards that will be labeled as crime, suspect, and location. You will randomly deal out 1 of each one of these to each player. This basically will represent the solution for the player that's sitting to your left. So in a 2-player game, it's just the other player who's sitting with me. So in this case, these cards would have gone to my opponent, and they now know the solution to the crime that I am looking to solve. Similarly, I will get 3 of these cards myself as well. They will be solutions to the card that my opponent is looking to solve. So keep that in mind. Those cards are not the solutions for your own crime, but rather the opponent's. Obviously, I will not know what the solution to mine looks like, but my opponent will know the solution to mine. So we'll flip them up for ease of explanation. So basically, the crime that I'm looking to solve will have Maurice as the criminal, the Union Square as the location, and then smuggling as the crime itself. So with that said, the game is now set up and ready to play. Let's go into what a turn order looks like and how the game works. So on your turn, you can do 1 of 3 different actions. And one of those actions is limited in terms of how often you can do it. So the first action that you can do is you can pick a card from this face-up row, and all of these cards basically correspond to either a location or a criminal or a crime on the board itself. So you would pick one of these, and you will check with your opponent in terms of whether that is anywhere near the actual solution or not. Now, what do we mean by that? So, as an example, let's say I picked up bank job. Now we'll quickly identify where bank job is on the board. So here's bank job, the tile itself. Now the crime that I'm looking to solve is smuggling, and as we can see, smuggling is right over here. So this is the actual crime that I'm looking to solve, but I've chosen this one and I'm checking on this one with my opponent. The way that it will work is, as soon as I say bank job, is this anywhere near my crime or not? Obviously this is nowhere near that, so at that point what basically happens is your opponent will check to see if it corresponds to anything that's adjacent to it or in that location itself. Now let's say if the crime I was looking to solve was actually bank job, they would take the circular cylinder and put it on it. That will tell me that that is the exact crime that I was looking for in that particular scenario. It will work the same way for crimes, as well as locations, as well as the criminal itself, or the suspect themselves. However, if this is not the exact one, but let's say, for example, the crime that I'm looking to solve is, just as an example, because it's not the case here, let's say it was murder. Murder is one space adjacent to it. So in this particular case, one space adjacent would be Ocean Drive, Trocadero, or something to that effect, and then Lakeside. So it's basically anything that's orthogonally adjacent. So if this were the actual crime I'm looking to solve, and this is the card that I've picked, they will put down a cube on it. What that tells me is that that is not the crime that I'm looking to solve, but the actual crime I'm looking to solve is adjacent to that particular location. So that's how I'm going to get clues once I pick up the card. So let's say, for example, and once you've done that, if this does not correspond to anything that you're looking to solve, you will basically take this card, put it in a pile in front of you as a reminder that this and its adjacent locations did not include that kind of clue for yourself. But if either a cube or a cylinder were put on it, this would go to the discard pile, and then a new card is going to be drawn and then put out in the display row. The next action that you can do, and like I said, sorry, before I forget, if I haven't said it earlier, it works the same way for the job as well as location as well as the suspect. So the next action I can do on my turn is put down an investigator token on any one of the locations. Whereas a card itself, playing a card itself will check for that particular type of clue in that location and the surrounding areas. Putting down an investigator token checks all three different types of clues in the surrounding area. So as an example, let's say if I were to put this down here, I am checking for clues on this location, but also everything that's adjacent to it. So Lakeside, Forest Park, Ocean Drive, Little Italy, Central Station, and Main Street, because all of these are orthogonally adjacent to this particular location that I put it down on. So what my opponent will now do is they will confirm if any one of the clues that I have correspond to this. So we had looked earlier that the crime I'm looking to solve is smuggling, and this is adjacent to this. So they will first of all take a cube and put it down here because it's not exactly on the spot, but it is adjacent to the spot. Next up, we're looking for Maurice, who's the suspect in my particular crime. Maurice is adjacent to it, so we will have a second cube that goes on here. And then thirdly, the crime that I'm looking to solve is at Union Square. Union Square is right here, so it is not adjacent to this. So we're not going to have any cube come onto the board for this one. What this basically tells me is that two different type of clues that I'm looking for are adjacent to this, but I do not know if those clues relate to the suspect or the location or the crime itself. But I need to figure that out through multiple investigations and multiple clues over the course of the game. It also tells me that there is no clue that I need to look for in this exact location itself, because if, let's say for example, if I was looking at this particular location as part of my solution, my opponent would put this down here, not on the correct tile itself, but on the investigator token. So what this would have told me is that I have one of the clues in this very exact location. It wouldn't tell me which one. But of course, in this particular case, just given the unique example, because there is no suspect or crime on this location, I know that this must be the location, this clue itself must correspond to the location itself. So even though I'm not getting it as the clue directly, I can infer that based on the solution and the location that I picked. So that's the second action you can do on your turn. The third action you can do on your turn is basically solve the crime itself. When you're solving a crime, what you will basically do is you will point out the suspect, the location, and the crime, and say that that is part of your solution. If you've gotten it all right, and you're the first player to get it all right, you will take your corresponding case marker. So in this case, I'm using the first case marker and put it on the 7-point track right here. What this basically means is you're the first person to solve this case, or one of the first people to solve this case, and you will get the full 7 points if that were the case. If somebody else had solved it in an earlier round, and then you're the second player to solve it in a 3 or 4 or 5 player game, your point marker would go to 5. So each round that you're behind in solving it, this you will get less and less points, and this marker will move on until if you get no points, then you're going to 0. In a 2-player game, as soon as somebody solved the crime itself, the other player has the option to solve the crime on that same turn. If they cannot, their marker will basically go to 0 directly. Basically, the way that it works is if you're playing with 2 or more players, the first player obviously will get the corresponding points. As soon as the last player is left in that round, they will have the option to solve the crime in that same round. If they cannot, they're getting 0. Obviously, if somebody solved the crime and the one player who has not solved the crime has already had their turn earlier in the round, they will move automatically to 0 because everybody gets the same number of rounds to solve each one of the crimes. If you point at the 3 crime, location, and suspect, and any one of these is incorrect, your penalty points marker will move by 1 space. You will not be told which one is incorrect, but it will just move so you know, either based on the information you have or you don't have, at least one, if not more, of your solution is incorrect. Each time you give a wrong, incorrect solution, this will continue moving an additional step, so it is theoretically possible for you to lose multiple points on the same round if you really get it right multiple times. As you can see from these 3 tokens, for the first, second, and third cases, the game takes place over 3 rounds. So once you've played the first round where everybody's had an equal number of opportunities to solve the crime, you will move on to the second case where this will refresh. The 3 crime cards that have been given to each player will then refresh again. So you're going to get a new set of suspect, location, and crime cards. And then everybody starts all over again with the first player marker moving to the player in a clockwise direction. The game will continue until 3 of these cases have been resolved with each corresponding player, and then at the very end of it, you're basically going to just add up the points that you have from this point track. So you will get points for 3 separate cases. So it might look something like this, for example. So I'm getting 7, 3, and 3 for 13 points. And then maybe I had 2 mistakes over the course of the game, so I lose 4 points. So it nets me a total of 9 points, 13 minus 4. And that pretty much is it for the rules. Few things I'll quickly point out before wrapping up. The number of investigative tokens that you get is limited. So you can only use this action 5 times over the course of the game. Once you've used one of these, they will basically go out of the game as soon as that case has been solved. So it is a finite resource, to keep that in mind. You can't just be dumping them all over the place on the very first case, because you would not have enough for subsequent cases should you need them. These obviously, the cubes and the cylinders obviously come back to your hand, so these would be used up again and again over multiple rounds. So don't worry about those as these are considered reusable resources. But that's pretty much it. So that's it for the rules for PI. Let's go back to the table and we'll share some final words on the game. All right, folks, so those were the rules for the game PI. As you can see, the game is not all that heavy, although there can be a little bit of AP involved every now and then as you're trying to solve the crime and you feel like your opponent may have more of the correct clues in place, so they might be able to make a guess any moment. So it sort of like pushes you a little bit to try out your luck, make a guess every now and then, and solve the crime before somebody else does. It's a fun game. It works quite well, and hopefully that explanation gives you a good sense on how the game works, and it helps you get it to the table without necessarily having to go through the rule book. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care.